My name is Martha Perry, and I was rinsing coffee mugs when my daughter-in-law called to tell me I was useless. Her voice came through the speaker sharp enough to slice the air. "You do nothing all day. Watch my kids while I'm in Malibu." No please, no pause. Just the kind of tone people use when they've stopped seeing you as a person. I stared at the sink, water still running. Steam curled around my hands, but the heat didn't reach the part of me that went cold. I said sure. I could watch them for 2 weeks. My voice stayed calm, the way I used to talk to my second graders right before a fire drill, steady enough to keep the room from falling apart. When the call ended, the kitchen felt too quiet. The only sound was the slow drip of the faucet, like a clock counting what was left of my patience. "Useless," she'd said. The word settled in my chest, heavy but not fatal. I had survived worse. I dried my hands, turned off the water, and whispered to the window. "Let's see about that." By noon, her SUV screeched to the curb. The back doors flew open, and 3 kids spilled out, Lily, Max, and little Theo, carrying backpacks, sticky fingers, and the kind of energy that rolls downhill fast. My son, Evan, came last, looking exhausted, like a man who'd misplaced his courage somewhere between daycare and debt. Amber didn't come inside. She stood by the car snapping selfies, sunlight hitting her oversized sunglasses. "Remember, gluten-free waffles," she said, "and no weird grandma rules." Then she waved at her reflection instead of us and drove away in a storm of perfume and entitlement. Inside, Theo ran straight for the cookie jar. Max claimed the couch, and Lily hovered in the doorway watching me. I reached for the jar lid before it clattered. "Not before dinner," I said. 3 pairs of eyes measured what kind of woman I was. I smiled, just enough to be mysterious. 2 weeks, I told the clock on the wall. Let's make them count. That first evening began like every uneasy truce. Evan had already left, promising to check in soon, which meant not tonight. The kids eyed me as if I were a substitute teacher whose rules they hadn't decided to follow yet. Dinner was pizza, the frozen kind that burns at the edges. Max sprawled on the couch with his sneakers on the cushion. Theo circled the room, sniffing out sugar like a small detective. Lily sat at the counter, quiet but alert, her eyes moving between me and the tablet I'd placed on top of the fridge. "We'll eat at the table," I said, laying out paper plates. "No tablets during meals, and shoes come off inside." Max snorted. "Mom says screens keep us quiet." "Quiet isn't the same as calm," I said, keeping my tone even. He rolled his eyes but kicked off his sneakers hard enough to leave a mark on the wall. I didn't scold him. I just picked them up and set them neatly by the door. We sat down. Theo smeared sauce across his cheek. Lily tore her crust into tiny pieces, and Max muttered something about grandma rules. I told them how I used to make this same pizza when Evan was their age, when we couldn't afford delivery but still wanted it to smell like a celebration. It wasn't a story about food, it was about trying. They didn't know that yet. After dinner, Theo followed me to the sink, asking if he could help. I handed him a towel and he dried the forks with serious concentration. Lily lingered in the doorway. She spoke so softly I almost missed it. "Mom cries at night," she said. "She thinks we don't know." I turned off the faucet and looked at her reflection in the dark window. "Kids hear more than grown-ups think," I said. "But that's not your job to fix." When Theo yawned, I lifted him onto my hip. He was heavier than he looked, all elbows and trust. "Come on, little man. Time for bed." Max pretended not to hear. I left the hall light on and told them good night, not expecting an answer. But just as I closed the door, Lily whispered, "Good night, Grandma." The word hit me like a kindness I hadn't known I needed. Downstairs, The house finally went still. I sat at the kitchen table with a pad of yellow paper and wrote 2 words. 2 weeks, then, under it, smaller ones: breakfast, chores, story time, library. Not rules, just shape. Years of teaching had taught me one thing: kids grow best inside structure, like vines on a fence. I looked around the quiet kitchen. The cookie jar gleamed under the lamp. The Wi-Fi router blinked its steady green light, pulsing like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I reached over and turned it off. Instant silence. No blinking, no hum. It felt like the first deep breath after holding one for too long. For the first time in years. The house sounded like mine again. Not perfect, not peaceful, just honest. I poured myself a cup of tea and listened to the tick of the clock. It wasn't much of a plan yet, but it was a start. Tomorrow, I'd make breakfast from scratch. I'd take them outside, show them the garden, maybe let them dig for worms. And if that failed, at least they'd remember the smell of dirt instead of the glow of a screen. I looked at the calendar on the fridge. 2 weeks. Amber had no idea what those 14 days would cost her. But she was right about one thing. I had time, and that can be dangerous in the hands of a woman with nothing left to prove. By the 3rd morning, the rhythm of the house had shifted. Theo woke up asking for pancakes instead of his tablet. Lily helped me crack the eggs, careful not to break the yolks. Max still tested limits, but he did it with less bite, like a boy who wasn't sure he wanted to be angry anymore. After breakfast, we walked to the library. The sun was gentle, Missouri gold, and the sidewalk still smelled like last night's rain. Lily held my hand halfway there and then pretended she hadn't. Inside, the kids scattered. Theo ran to the fish tank, Max to the comics, Lily to the section marked Adventure. I watched them from a corner table, wondering how long it had been since anyone looked at them without a phone in hand. On the way home, my phone buzzed. Amber. A text with a photo of her by a pool, cocktail in hand, tagged Mommy Moon. She added, "Make sure Lily wears the blue dress for the live stream tomorrow. Engagement's better with blue." I didn't reply. I just looked at the picture. Her smile too wide. Her sunglasses catching the reflection of a man's arm next to her. He wasn't my son. That evening, Lily left her tablet on the counter, screen unlocked. I didn't mean to snoop, but curiosity, I've learned, can be another word for instinct. Notifications scrolled across, beach photos, comments full of hearts, and a message preview from someone named Chris W. I shouldn't have, but I opened it. "Can't wait till you're back. The kids drive you crazy, huh? Worth it when we're in the water again." I stared at the message until the letters blurred. My hands went cold. For a long time, I just stood there, listening to the washing machine spin in the other room, its steady rhythm louder than my heartbeat. Later, when the kids were asleep, I sat with my tea and opened the family laptop. The cloud backup for Amber's photos was still linked. Most people don't realize how much of their life they leave open. Beach dinners, hotel selfies, bar receipts, each one a breadcrumb, each one pointing towards something my son didn't see. I didn't tell Evan. Not yet. You don't drop a bomb without checking where the shrapnel will land. Instead, I started writing things down, dates, places, screenshots. My notes looked like a teacher's lesson plan, except the subject was betrayal. The next afternoon, the kids built a pillow fort in the living room. Theo called it Castle Grandma. While they argued about who got the biggest pillow, I reached up to the mantel and adjusted the old clock. It had a tiny camera inside, a gift from my neighbor's son after a string of break-ins. He'd said, "You never know when proof will matter." At the time, I thought he meant burglars. I angled the clock toward the couch, then stepped back and watched its small red light blink once before disappearing. No one noticed. They were busy building walls of their own, That night, Amber called. The music behind her voice told me she was anywhere but Malibu with the kids on her mind. "Post some photos of them tomorrow," she said. "Something cute. #grandmagoals." Her laugh was bright and empty. "Amber," I said quietly. "The kids aren't props." She paused just long enough for me to hear ice clinking in her glass. "Don't get dramatic, Martha. Enjoy being useful for once." Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand. Outside, the streetlights hummed. Inside, the clock camera watched in silence. I used to think proof was about winning an argument. Now I knew it was about survival. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering more. Not for revenge. For the children sleeping upstairs, dreaming under a roof that deserved the truth. 2 mornings later, a padded envelope showed up on my porch, forwarded from Evan's townhouse. His name was on the label, but curiosity won. I slid it open with the paring knife I'd used since 1982 and spilled a stack of papers onto the counter. Bank statements, credit card bills, printouts with Amber's name in bold beside his. Every page whispered the same story. Charges from Westline Media, plane tickets to Los Angeles, hotel rooms that cost more than my first car. I called Evan. No answer. I left a message that started calm and ended sharp. When he finally texted back, it was 3 words. "Can't talk now." I looked at the paper again, then at the clock camera glowing faintly from the mantel. I had promised myself not to meddle, but promises built on denial don't hold long. That afternoon, the kids were sprawled on the floor, making a fort out of couch cushions. Theo waved a blanket like a flag and shouted, "Castle Grandma!" I smiled, took a photo, proof of what safety looked like, and went to my room. I laid every document on the bed in neat rows, teacher style, color-coded with sticky notes. Next to flights, I wrote Miami. Next to media, I wrote fraud. My pen shook once, then steadied. When Evan finally knocked that evening, he looked like a man who hadn't slept inside his own skin for weeks. I pushed a bowl of stew toward him. He stared at it like he'd forgotten what hot food smelled like. "Mom, don't start," he said. "I won't," I said, and slid the papers across the table. He read in silence. His eyes moved faster and faster until they stopped. "She told me Westline was for brand deals," he whispered. "I thought it was good for us." "It was good for her," I said softly. He pressed his palms against his temples. I kept telling myself she just needed space, that the kids were safe with her, that you and I just didn't get it. I reached over and covered his hand with mine. We all build stories that make pain look organized, but this one is starting to fall apart. Let's do it right this time. He nodded once. "What do we do?" "We gather proof, we keep the kids steady, and we talk to someone who knows how to turn a mess into paperwork." The next morning, Denise came over. She was my old neighbor, now a paralegal who could smell a lie through a closed briefcase. She sat at the table with her reading glasses low on her nose, scanning the pile. "Emergency custody, financial disclosure, protective petition," she murmured. "It's not pretty, but it's doable." "Will the court listen to me?" Evan asked. "They'll listen to facts," she said, tapping the papers. "And these sing in key." While they talked, I poured coffee and stared at the mantel. The clock's silent lens faced the room where the children were laughing over cereal, proof already in motion. That evening, Amber called. I put her on speaker so Evan could hear. "You're overreacting," she said before he even spoke. "Everyone does collabs. The debt's temporary. Stop letting your mother fill your head." "I'm looking at receipts," he said quietly. Her voice sharpened. "Oh, so now you spy on me. You and your perfect mom. Maybe you should both remember who actually built this family." Lily, standing in the hallway, heard enough to freeze. I ended the call. "Not tonight," I said, and hung up. Evan buried his face in his hands. "She'll ruin me online," he muttered. "Then let her try," I said. Truth travels slower than gossip, but it lasts longer. After he left for a shower, I sat at the table alone, tracing the rim of my mug. The clock behind me caught my reflection. Small, steady, older than I remembered. I thought about Amber's words, useless. Funny thing about useless people, they always find a way to be necessary when the world starts shaking. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 lines. 1, kids safe. 2, proof, saved. 3, next step, confrontation. Then I underlined confrontation twice, closed the book, and turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow she'd come home expecting silence. What she'd get instead was every truth she'd spent years avoiding. The 2 weeks ended on a Thursday. Gray and windless. I'd just taken the brownies out of the oven when I saw a car pull into the driveway, Amber's white Lexus, shining like nothing bad ever happened inside it. She stepped out with sunglasses, phone already raised. "Kids," she called. "Come give Mommy a smile for the feed." No one answered. They were upstairs, reading. The sound of quiet pages turning instead of screens. She walked into the kitchen without asking. Perfume first, attitude second. "Where are they?" "In their rooms," I said. "Doing homework." She looked around as if inspecting a rental. "You cleaned up nice. Guess retirement gives you plenty of time." I kept my voice low. "Sit down. Amber." Her brows lifted. "Excuse me?" Evan came in from the hallway, a folder in his hands. His face was pale but steady. He set the papers on the table. "We need to talk." She gave a brittle laugh. "Oh God, not another intervention. You two should start a podcast." She reached for her phone, but I slid the folder closer to her. Photos, receipts, screenshots. The last page was the bank statement with Westline Media highlighted in yellow. Her mouth twitched. "You went through my accounts?" "You went through my trust," Evan said quietly. Amber's eyes darted between us, calculating the odds. "This is ridiculous. I was building something for us, for exposure." "Exposure to what?" I asked. "Debt? Or the man in the baseball cap?" Her eyes narrowed. "You're pathetic. Martha, always jealous that I'm younger, prettier, relevant." I cut her off. "I'm too old to compete with ghosts." "Amber, we're here for the kids." Evan slid another document forward. Temporary custody papers, drafted by the lawyer. He didn't tremble this time. "Sign these. You'll have visitation after review. No criminal charges if you cooperate." Amber's voice cracked. "You can't take them from me." "The court can," he said. She turned to me, desperation breaking through the arrogance. "You did this. You poisoned him against me." I met her eyes. "No. You did that when you stopped showing up." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the clock on the wall ticking, steady, patient, merciless. Then a small shuffle at the hallway door. Lily stood there, holding Theo's hand. Max hovered behind them, shoulders squared like a boy trying to be brave. "Mom," Lily said softly, "Grandma told the truth. We heard you on the phone." Her voice didn't tremble. "You said you didn't want to come back." Amber's face went white, then red, then nothing. She reached for her phone, then stopped. Theo's lower lip quivered. "Are we bad?" he asked. "No," I said. Before she could, "You're good kids who deserve peace." Amber looked at the papers again. She picked up the pen with shaking fingers. "This isn't fair. Fair left the house a long time ago," I said. "Do the right thing now." She signed. The pen scraped loud in the quiet room, like a confession on paper. When she was done, she pushed it away and stood, "You'll regret this," she said to Evan. He shook his head. "No, I'll regret waiting so long." At the door, she turned to me one last time. "You always hated me. I wanted you to love my son," I said, "and the life you were given." She left without looking back. The air she'd brought with her went too, leaving the house heavy but clean. I sat down, feeling the weight settle in my bones. Evan leaned against the counter, eyes closed. The kids came closer, silent. I opened my arms. For the first time in years, they fit there easily. The brownies on the stove cooled untouched, but the house was finally warm. The days after she left moved slower, like the house itself needed time to believe the quiet was real. Evan and the kids stayed with me while the paperwork wound through the system. There were appointments, phone calls, meetings with a social worker who wore kind eyes and sensible shoes. Every time she left, she'd say the same thing. "You're doing fine, Mrs. Perry. Keep things steady." Steady. What a small word for so much effort. Evan started taking the kids to therapy once a week. He came home different each time, less brittle, more human. Some nights, after they'd gone to bed, he'd sit at the table with me and talk about everything he'd ignored for years. How love had turned into performance, how exhaustion had felt like loyalty, how ashamed he was that he hadn't seen the cracks until I forced him to look. I told him shame was only useful if you turned it into wisdom. He nodded, eyes wet but steady. The kids adapted faster than I did. Theo decided bedtime stories should be about real heroes, teachers, firefighters, nurses. Lily drew a picture of our house with a sun so big it barely fit the page. Max asked if he could start helping in the garden for exercise, though I caught him smiling when he pulled his first weed. We found a rhythm, not perfect, but honest. Some evenings we'd sit on the porch and play cards, the same deck I'd used that first night when the Wi-Fi went dark. The laughter came slow at first, then steady, like a creek thawing after winter. One morning, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and a photo of the kids at the beach from a summer I barely remembered. The handwriting was neat, almost careful. "Martha, I'm in Arizona, working and trying to be better. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it yet. Tell Evan I'm proud he finally stood up. Tell the kids I love them, even if loving means letting go. Thank you for saving them from me. Amber." I read it twice, then a third time aloud. There was no anger left in the words, just exhaustion and a flicker of remorse. I put the letter in a box with the old photos, not out of sentiment, but because some endings deserve a place to rest. That same week, I cleared out the garage and painted a sign, Second Chance Art. It wasn't a business, just a room where the kids and a few neighborhood children could come to paint, glue, and make beautiful messes. Lily helped me hang the sign. She asked, "Is it for art or for people?" "Both," I said. She smiled like she understood. On Mother's Day, they surprised me with a card shaped like a teapot. Inside, Lily had written, "Grandma. You fixed the Wi-Fi, the house, and us." Theo added a drawing of a bird that looked like an asteroid. Max wrote, "Don't ever change the password again." Evan brought coffee and sat beside me quietly. When I looked at him, I saw traces of the boy I used to chase to school, and the man he was finally becoming. That night, when the house settled and everyone slept, I stood by the mantel. The clock camera was still there, silent and blind. I hadn't turned it on since that day. Some things don't need watching anymore, they just need trusting. I turned off the lights and let the dark fold around me. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and chocolate, the ordinary mix of a house alive again. Outside, a train passed in the distance, long and low like the sound of moving on. For the first time in years, I didn't feel useless. I felt necessary, not because someone needed me, but because I'd chosen to stand my ground when it mattered. Justice had done its job. Love had finished the rest. And that, I thought, was enough.